Your money, your business. This is Financial Poise Radio, the spoken word sister of financialpoise.com.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Financial Poise Radio. I am Christopher Cahill, your host. In a few minutes, after I get finished with a little solo talking, I will be speaking with David Jarczyk, President and Chief Executive Officer of KtMINE. That's KtMINE. He created KtMINE in order to discern innovation strategy with respect to intellectual property at particular companies. Stick around to find out what he has done and how he has done it. But before that, let me just say a few words about Financial Poise webinars. Financial Poise webinars are not just for attorneys and accountants who need professional educational credits. They're also for regular folks, business owners, executives, accredited investors, indeed anybody who is curious to explore business, finance, and law, and maybe get behind financial and legal journalism to what is more likely to be the truth rather than mere publicity. All Financial Poise webinars, regardless of the topic, are in plain English. All have a practical focus so that anybody with a reasonable intelligence can follow and profit from what is being said. So I heartily recommend that you take a look at Financial Poise webinars, a subsite under the financialpoise.com umbrella. Another subsite under the very same umbrella is Crowdfunding Investor. And I want to point you to something very useful. Speaking of plain English and practical focus, something very useful on that site. Crowdfunding Investor on its front page has several columns of different topics that might be of interest to somebody who's trying to sort out the opportunities and pitfalls of investing in private companies through one form or another of what is considered to be crowdfunding. One of those columns is due diligence. Now that sounds boring. The last thing anybody wants to do is really look under the hood. Well, maybe you should not leave all of that to your financial advisors, or maybe you should. But if you're curious and really want to know what's under the hood, the very first thing you might consider learning about is financial statements. And there's an excellent article in plain English with a practical focus on financial statements right there, written by David Friedman, who founded and populated the subsite initially, and is a highly valued member of our family here at Financial Poise and a former guest on this show. Mr. Friedman drew his somewhat lengthy, thorough, but again, plain English, practical focus article from writings at the Securities and Exchange Commission, which likewise are intended to inform ordinary people about financial statements, which illustrates that not every dollar the federal government spends is wasted. Indeed, if you look at many of our federal bodies and look for the documents by which they explain themselves, you'll have a better idea of what's wasted and what's not. You might even find very valuable things written, as you will find if you look at the SEC website. Lots of useful information there as well. For more help on financial statements and the like, I commend to you the column on Financial Poise entitled EBITDA and Other Scary Words. Well, EBITDA is not a word, it's an acronym, but it's an acronym which is kind of scary, and you'll find it sometimes in financial statements and certainly in other documents related to financial statements. The column is written by Yesenia Cordova, William Ryan, and Charles Sadek, all of Eisner Amper LLP. Their most recent column is on PP&E. Do you know what that is? I had to look it up too. Property, plant, and equipment. And there you have the beginning of no longer being afraid of terminology. It occurs to me that maybe we should start a blockchain column in Financial Poise. Such is the excitement around this technology, which is really a ledger technology. Well, we recorded an interview with Lex Sokolin of Autonomous Research on the topic, which will air in a few weeks. So I just would like to speak briefly about an article in the American Banker. That's www.americanbanker.com, entitled BNP Paribas Joins the Blockchain Lab Legion. It's written by Brian Patrick Eha, dated September 14, 2016. BNP Paribas. I don't know how other people pronounce Paribas. That's how it would be in French. Paribas. It's a very large bank. And you've seen the word on the financial pages. I studied French. I don't know where that Paribas comes. I've never seen a word like that. Well, it's not really a word. The original name of the bank was Banque de Paris et des Pays-Bas. So Banque de Paris, Bank of Paris, et des Pays-Bas. Pays is country, Bas is low, so low country. So Bank of Paris and the Netherlands. Paribas is a collapsing of the word for Paris and half of the word for Netherlands. So it's BNP Paribas, BNP Paris Low. If you smash those words together, in Paris, Low evokes the Paris of Inspector Maigret from the great Georges Simenon books, and the Paris of the Hunchback of Notre Dame, those canals under the streets. At any rate, just as Banque de Paris et des Pays-Bas had a very old world sound and has become newfangled, so the institution has become newfangled with regard to blockchain. The article informs us that last week, BNP Paribas opened a 5,000 square foot innovation lab in New York. 5,000 square feet in New York. That's an insane amount of money to gain control of that amount of space, and it's a big investment for an innovation lab for a bank. The first use of this innovation lab for this bank was a 2-day hackathon focused on blockchain technology. Approximately 40 employees participated, and before they got started, York Rhodes III, who heads Microsoft's own blockchain team, gave a talk, and there was a panel discussion by other luminaries. The article quotes Bruno Dillier, that's D''ILLIERS, who is the Chief Operating Officer of BNP Paribas North America, who said he believes that distributed shared ledgers, and that's what blockchain is, a distributed shared ledger, will, quote, shape the future of the banking industry. Well, he may be right. I say that as somebody who has been teaching himself about it, just as we hope you will teach yourself about important aspects of your financial life through looking at financialpoise.com. And I guess time will tell. But first, let's get to the interview. We are here with David Jarczyk of KtMINE. David Jarczyk loves to uncover secrets. Off the clock, David explores caves and caverns. The creation of his company, KtMINE, was inspired by his urge to uncover the strategies and capabilities of business entities which can be hidden, like the secrets of caves and caverns. Jarczyk recognized that intellectual property assets represent up to 80% of corporate value, but that it is impossible to figure out a company's innovation strategy if you read only its public filings or listen only to its management. KtMINE was built to bridge that gap, in part by harvesting, organizing, and collecting data relevant to innovation strategy. There's more to it than that, but I'll leave that to David. KtMINE serves corporate, governmental, and intergovernmental bodies. David, thank you for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me. I look forward to this chat.
All right, well, let's talk first about drunkards in parking lots. Way back when I was studying social science, the metaphor for misdirected research was the drunkard under the lamp post in a parking lot. So it's a dark parking lot, it's nighttime. There's one lamp lit in the middle of this parking lot, and there's a man fumbling around under that lamp. A policeman approaches and engages the man in conversation. "What are you doing?" the policeman asks. The man says drunkenly, "I'm looking for my keys." The policeman says, "Well, where do you think you lost them? Where'd you see them last?" The drunkard points drunkenly out into the darkness somewhere. And the policeman says, "Well, why are you looking for them in this place?" The drunkard says, "Well, the light's better here." So it's looking in the wrong place because that's where the light is shown, which is what happens when you have misdirected research. But David, does any of this relate to what KtMINE does?
Yeah, it absolutely does, and that's probably a better analogy than I could ever come up with. You know, today you can look at a company's annual report, listen to their analyst calls, and really learn nothing about a company's innovation strategy. You know, you might learn that their R&D to sales is 5%, or they're thinking of going in a particular direction. But what is the company really innovating? What is their real direction? Currently, research analysts, journalists, it's certainly easier to look under the light and see what's there. The good news is with a company like KtMINE, we find innovation and IP data, which is scattered and unstructured, and piece it together and shine a light on it. And this is both a question of technology innovation, but it's also a question of brand innovation, such as what brands is a company looking to develop. Right? So we're talking about disruptive technologies, we're talking about disruptive brands. So what I'm telling you is that by looking at this data, which sometimes gets a bad rap, because you hear the words patent, trademark, license agreement, you think of legal things. But I promise you, if you look at this data and link it together, what you can actually gain insight into is a company's innovation activities. And I guess for me as an investor or a researcher, why wouldn't I want to know what the real innovation activities are of the company before I choose to invest or not invest?
I took a gander at your website. It's a lot of fun, a lot of good things on it, including blogs. So I'm referring now to a March 2nd, 2016 blog post. So we can talk about an example of innovation strategy or maybe lack of strategy. I don't know. Anyway, the March 2nd, 2016 blog post was on GoPro. GoPro, most people know about it. I know about it, even though I've never purchased any of their products. They look pretty cool. Cameras and stuff you can mount on your body or elsewhere. It looks great, except its stock price is tanking. It's not doing well. Why would that be when they seem to have such a strong product and seem to be doing so well? You gave some thoughts about that in your blog post. I was wondering if you could share some of that reasoning with us.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So one of the benefits of connecting all this innovation and IP data, again, is that we can sort of get a crystal ball or a light shining on where a company is going. So I first read about the stock collapse in Motley Fool. I don't invest in GoPro, so Motley Fool covered it. And they did a good job. In the article, it cited some lessons that investors can learn from the collapse in GoPro's price. I think the first lesson was a brand can only get you so far, right? Brand awareness doesn't equal brand loyalty. And then secondly, if a product looks like a niche product, then it probably is. So it seems like investors hope for more technology from GoPro, more innovation, and it was baked into GoPro's price. Using KtMINE, I could see that GoPro is actually spending significant resources on branding. So more specifically, they're focusing on brand extension versus technology innovation. I guess the market is obviously punishing them for that. It should be mentioned too, though, just recently saw GoPro is also looking to make a business out of licensing content. So I wonder if there's going to be any innovation around licensing content or if they're just going to stick with the status quo.
Just go back just a moment and
Sure.
think about what their products are. I mean, they're basically, leaving aside the licensing you were just talking about, but they're basically ways of photographing or videotaping things conveniently. It doesn't sound like it's a real great leap forward with, can't other companies make similar products fairly readily?
It's certainly possible. And, you know, if we wanted to take a look what other entities are playing in the space, that's something we certainly could look to do. But I'm with you. I think overall it's a fantastic brand, right? And it's a brand that asks for excitement from its users and from its purchasers. But knowing that doesn't make me buy one. I actually do not own one.
Okay, and then, all right, so they're leaning heavily on branding and maybe not maybe it's not apparent that it's going to work quite the way they are hoping. But what about the intellectual property profile of the company otherwise?
So when we look at it, it's exactly what you would expect and what you just said. It's significant patents around technology for not only the cameras and the recording devices, but being able to store them, share them, and compress them. So it's exactly what you would expect from a company such as GoPro. When you take a look at where they're going, though, that's the interesting thing. What patents have they filed? Where has their R&D been successful, for example? What I'm not seeing is any new business lines or technologies. What I'm actually seeing is this focus and continued focus on building brands through trademarks as well as logos and different type branding awareness, if you will. It points back to Motley Fool's point that branding can only get you so far, that awareness does not equal a purchase. And in this case, unless GoPro finds another outlet for revenues in a different technology, it may end up being just a niche product. So we'll have to wait and see.
All right, well, that was an interesting one. And along the same lines, but a totally different company, there was a blog post on Boeing. Boeing is a company that makes airplanes. And then one thinks, oh, they probably make Defense Department stuff too. But you had more to say about it than just that.
Yeah, Boeing is actually a very interesting company and now headquartered in Chicago, where KtMINE is located. So most of us know them for their airplanes, commercial jets, and aerospace. Others know them as well for defense business, as you mentioned. But I think most people don't know that Boeing is also working actively to find secondary uses of its technology. And what do I mean by that? Well, Boeing is active in licensing its technology to non-core sectors in the hopes of generating additional revenue streams. It's actually pretty smart. So let me take a step back, a quick thought about licensing. So licensing is a great strategy to generate revenue so long as you're licensing your technology and or brand to partners in non-core sectors, right? They're not competing with you. So think about Boeing for a second. Think about the information storage capabilities they must have, that technology, in order to store flight data, whether it's for a commercial jet or a military jet. I'm sure this could have other applications, maybe a smart car, right, which is effectively a big computer now. Why wouldn't Boeing license out technology to non-competing industries in an effort to generate income? It's a good business practice.
All right, so I'm thinking about the information you're pulling together as you look at these companies. Patents are a matter of public record. Trademarks are a matter of public record. If you have the right kind of geeks working for your company, you can pull patents and pull trademarks on a given competitor or a given company you might invest in, or a given company you might be partnering with. Well, KtMINE will give you that information and quickly and all that. But it seems to me that when you talk about licensing agreements, that's something that's less apparently publicly available, and KtMINE is really aggregating information in a particular way that's particularly valuable when you're looking at a Boeing or some other company that might be relying on licensing either now or potentially.
That's a very good point. License agreements are a unique set of data points that generally other providers overlook or analysts overlook because they're hard to find. So they exist in the public domain. Sometimes they're filing requirements by the SEC in the U.S., for example, or in Canada there's requirements. You can find them in places such as the UK through Companies House and annual reports. Other times they're on company websites. Qualcomm is very good about putting many of their license agreements on company websites. You can also actually find them as press releases, believe it or not, and it's generally not the big company, the licensor, that is publishing license agreements. It is actually the small company who is excited to now have a partnership and see its revenue increase, right? So our job at KtMINE is to find those license agreements, which are very unstructured text, 200, 300 pages long, and get them analyzed and connected to all the other data sets. But, let's step back for 1 second if I can. You made an interesting point about patents and trademarks. As a matter of fact, anybody that wants it, I'm always happy to provide a roadmap for how to go about creating a total portfolio for any company. So you're right, you can go to the patent office and get the patents and trademarks, for example. But what you'll need to do is go to the patent office not only in the U.S., but in every country, there's WIPO, there's European Patent Office, and so on and so forth. So it's many, many different sets to search. You then have to go and search for those license agreements everywhere that I mentioned. You know, the process itself is so crazy and so long that it would take hundreds of hours to do as a human, but you could do it. Then you've got the big problem, and it's really a big problem. All that data, well, it's not structured and it's not connected. And I think that's where KtMINE provides its value prop, by being able to instantly do that for you.
And then plus the licensing agreements, which I think is really cool. I don't want to read one of them, and I'm a lawyer. I don't want to read a 50-page licensing agreement, let alone a 300-page licensing
That's
agreement,
right.
let alone all the licensing agreements, and compare them to the licensing agreements of competitors and pick out what's really going on, how to make relevant comparisons, how to make relevant projections.
Yeah, and you know, the best part to me about the license agreements, it really indicates value. If another company or another individual or another entity is willing to pay you money regularly for many years for your technology or your brand, well, then that indicates value, doesn't it? And these agreements will also tell you what that value is. So it's a very, very powerful data set that if you connect it to patents and trademarks, you really get to see what's taking place. And you know, what really happens, and the way I like to think about this, you had the streetlight example. You know, for me, it's really hard to look at a company's portfolio just for today, let's say. What's more exciting is to look at it over time and piece it together, let's say, quarter by quarter or month by month. Because what you start to see is trends. You start to see some patents being filed in a new industry, let's say, okay? Next, you'll start to see some licensing in of a technology or a brand. So now you see more commitment. Then you'll see trademarks being filed in that sector. Next, you'll start to get snippets of news, which we also cover on that sector. You know, this data connected really becomes a leading indicator on innovation strategy. And it's a very cool story you can piece together by watching it take place.
Well, so long as we've been talking about GoPro and then something larger like Boeing, let's talk about one of the biggest of them all, Amazon. You recently reflected on Amazon's innovations in video. It's hard to think of anything Amazon is not doing other than, you know, purchasing baseball teams or something. The fact that they're innovating in video is not a surprise, but what is it you've been able to discern about Amazon?
Well, this kind of is exactly what we just talked about, that story, right? So recently it was announced that Amazon has a new subscription model for Prime Video, which is something like $8 or $9 a month, okay? If you've been monitoring Amazon's innovation activities the way I just described, you would have actually been able, or should have been able, to predict that Amazon was going to do something big in video streaming and content services, okay? So I actually have here on a piece of paper scratched down from KtMINE what it looked like. So last November, Amazon publishes a patent for SmartList video channels. Then in January, a company called Elemental Technology, which is a software video solution company that delivers content, so it's a content delivery company, assigns 18 patents to Amazon. March, Amazon publishes patents for selecting advertising to be presented with digital content. And then all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but over time, if you really look at the portfolio of Amazon, there's something like 50 patents in video and distribution, and 16 of those were granted 2015 and 2016. So you can sort of see that story unfold from November to January to March to today, or to the announcement that they were going into video streaming and content, and not to mention there will be advertising with that.
I don't want to raise the specter of competing with Amazon. Nobody wants to do that. But let's say you are competing with a company that is actively developing innovation strategies, at least you think so. And there might be a story unfolding over time. Is there a way to keep abreast of that on a regular basis?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a fantastic question, right? As a competitor, as a company, one of the biggest questions you'll probably ask, or what you want to know, is where's the competitor innovating? And better yet, wouldn't you actually want to know what you're really worried about? Who's that new small startup in a garage that's going to disrupt the industry, right? That's what we're really worried about. Well, the beauty is, the way I just tracked through those events for Amazon We allow for users to get alerts as they take place, as they hit our data sets. So what you'll see over time is not only what competitors are doing on a day-by-day or week-by-week basis, but you'll also see any new entrants into the space, companies that you've never heard of. And what's really nice about that is, again, you begin to build a story. 1 alert, 2 alerts, you're not going to do too much. But over a few alerts and a few reviews over what's taking place, you start to get context of what's happening, and that's where, if you're in competitive intelligence, you start to go to your bosses and say, what should we do with this?
Yeah. All right, well, let's shift. I think you've given a compelling story in a nutshell, how you help competitors and therefore how you might help potential companies working together. Of course, if you see the same alerts, maybe you find somebody you want to work with, combine
That's
with,
right.
perhaps, or partner with on a particular project. Yeah.
That's absolutely right.
But KtMINE isn't limited to only commercial applications. KtMINE has gotten involved in governmental performance and national security issues to the extent you're able to talk about these things, David. Could you comment?
Yeah, sure. I mean, without getting too far into the details, think about it this way. What's one of the biggest threats to the government, to our government in the U.S. or the EU? Well, it's the technology, our sacred technology, getting in the hands of the enemy, right? Mm-hmm. From an economic perspective, though, there's also a threat to our economy. And that threat is our technology is bought up by companies outside of the U.S., right? Sort of a shift of revenues, a shift of profit offshore. So being able to see where technologies and brands are moving across borders is very important to government, whether it's for national security or just simple economics. And what's really nice about the data that we're combining, along with those alerts, is that what you can actually see is from a geographic location where IP, where technologies, where brands are being moved from one country to another. That's a very powerful thing to know, whether you're in national security or just trying to protect the economy.
Because once it's moved, you can't really get it back.
That's exactly correct.
It's not like having a destroyer find its way into the wrong hands and you can go get the destroyer.
And I'm not to speak who is our threat or what is our threat. I think we can all agree that being informed of a movement of IP is the same way for competitive intelligence that Amazon or Netflix want to know what the other one's doing. I would say that certainly governments want to do so for both national security and economic reasons.
I know that we have an article on Financial Poise with respect to governmental oversight of transactions with entities from other countries. So it's hard to sell a Chinese entity, for example, a sensitive nuclear technology or something, without the government, forget the name of the office, coming in and vetting the deal or not vetting the deal. And if it doesn't vet the deal doesn't happen. But I mean, if we just raise the specter of IP being transferred through a deal without anybody knowing about it, well, then it's just too late for anything to happen. So it's a relief, I guess, that the government is thinking about keeping track of things through sophisticated means.
I would certainly agree. It's just another tool to their disposal or at their disposal.
All right, well, let's wrap up. You identified a gap and you've been filling it. And I'm sure you're discovering things along the way as you develop and run KtMINE and its various endeavors. But let me ask you a two-part question. Do you have any favorite unexplored caves? And you've told us that. Do you have any favorite unsolved business information or innovation problems?
I'll answer this question two ways. First, personally, I would love more than anything. There's a show, I'm not sure if it's History Channel or what it is, where they explore tunnels and caves. I would love nothing more than to go and be able to walk in the Chicago L system underground. And I would love even more so to do it in New York. There's got to be things down there that generations have forgot about and would be amazing. But from a business perspective, when we look at kind of unexplored caves around innovation, the big thing that keeps gnawing at me is the answer to this question: how do companies value innovation? How do they determine what is valuable, how to go to market versus what to just throw away or put on a shelf or sell? With all our research and all of our data, there's a human element, a decision-making process there that I don't know that can be cracked by code. And that's what we're trying to see if there's a way to do so. So we're certainly looking at asset purchase values. We're certainly looking at the values that are in our agreements as well as in the news. But, it's really hard to find a decision tree that would work, or an algorithm, even better, that would work for most companies. So that's really the unsolved business problem that KtMINE is looking at today.
Well, I can tell you that many a bankruptcy judge would be happy to get that algorithm and cut short the massive litigation costs that surround valuation fights, which, as one might imagine, are often
absolutely
the complex bankruptcy cases.
Yeah, same with those companies that hold hundreds, thousands of patents and don't know what to do with it. To have an answer to that would be pretty amazing, wouldn't it?
It would. Well, David Jarczyk, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
We've been speaking with David Jarczyk, the founder of KtMINE. Look for KtMINE, KtMINE on the internet. I'm sure you'll find out all you need to know. But also, please look for his bio on financialpoise.com. You've been listening to Financial Poise Radio. I am Christopher Cahill, the host. Financial Poise Radio is produced by Stephanie Strait. Thank you all for listening. Let's do this again sometime soon.
Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe through iTunes or Stitcher, or you can download our app from Libsyn. You can also listen right on our website, www.financialpoise.com. Each week, Financial Poise Radio brings you news and education about finance, investing, business, and law. To see a short written summary of this episode, go to www.financialpoise.com. Financial Poise Radio is a production of Financial Poise Radio Productions, LLC.